So today I'm going to be talking about a basic mastering technique tutorial through Ableton Live. Just a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about today includes a pyramid of sound and balancing techniques, some panning techniques, compression and limiters, reverberators, and some vocal effects as well. To start off, I'm going to talk about the pyramid of sound. So pyramid of sound is actually more of a concert band technique that I learned in middle school, and it's a conceptual way of looking at ensemble balance relative to timbre, blending, and harmonic structure. The key to this is to build all sound from the bottom up, meaning that low voices use the most volume and upper voices use the least, hence the pyramid. So I've got a little visual for you here. This is a pretty representative visual of what I do when I edit my songs through Ableton. Is I start from the bottom up, meaning that the drums and the bass get the absolute most volume distribution, and then the lead vocal is going to be a lot more compressed. Next, I'm going to talk about some panning techniques. So on Ableton, something super unique on this particular software is its auto pan features. This means that instead of meticulously drawing in an automated panning pattern, you can turn on a device that just does it for you. So over here we have our auto pan features. We have a lot of different classified versions. And my two favorites are Around the Head and Chopper, and I applied this to the vocals in the chorus. So we got the Around the Head and Chopper. Basically, anytime you want to use an audio effect, you just drag it. So I've got the lead vocals right here, and if you go onto the automation drop-down menu, you can see that I have a chopper and Around the Head. And you can mess with when the device turns on and off, and I turned it on at specific parts in my vocals with the chopper just because the chopper is a lot more intense. It sounds like the sound is going back and forth between each ear really fast. And then the Around the Head is more gradual, so I just dragged it along the entire chorus to make it sound more full. Okay, next I'm going to talk about compression and limiters. So a compressor reduces gain for signals above a user-settable threshold. To elaborate on this, a compressor will reduce the levels of peaks, opening up more headroom and allowing that overall signal to be turned up. So this way, your track can be a lot louder and clearer without distorting or clipping. So I basically add a compressor to all of my super important tracks, like for example, like vocals, drums, bass, and really anything you intend to be heard the best. In comparison, a limiter is honestly pretty similar. A limiter is actually a compressor, but they're similar in the sense that they both deal with gain reduction, except a limiter is different because it limits the threshold of an output completely, and a compressor will just smoothly reduce it. I don't really use limiters as much. Really, they're for those super clippy sounds, like especially in drum racks and audio especially. So I added a compressor on the vocals. I added a precise and a de-esser, and basically what these do is a precise just compresses the vocals to make it sound more loud, but to really emphasize those specific sounds in the vocals. And then a de-esser is exactly as it sounds. It de-esses those S noises, the S pronunciations in your words especially. Sometimes when you record your voice, the S sounds almost sound muffled and they clip, and the de-esser just brings down that threshold a little bit more. I also added a reduced limiter on the lead vocals so that they sound as clear as possible. So you see right here, I've got a reduce. I added an acoustic compressor on the guitar audio to make it sound more clear. So right here on this guitar track, I added an acoustic compressor, and it's just going the entire way. This way, it just sounds as clear and clean. I didn't want the guitar to sound too crunchy. And then I added another precise compressor on the drum rack to really bring out that specific sound as well as the bass. So these two tracks right here, I added a precise compressor. Next, I'm going to talk about reverberators. So reverberators are devices that manipulate a sound's environment to make it sound like it's in a bigger, smaller, or even more specifically acoustic space. So our reverberators are right here in our audio effect racks. You see they have 3 different categories that specify what you want. It deals with ambiance and the wet versus dry concept. For example, a cathedral sounds more wet, right here, and a closet would sound more dry. And what wet and dry means is that a wet sound is going to have more sound bouncing off the walls, hence That's why a cathedral is going to sound more wet. And a dry sound means that there's not going to be as much sound bouncing off. It's going to sound a lot more in one place, hence why a closet would be more dry. So for example, I added a small chamber reverberator on one of the backup vocal tracks up here, this backup vocal track here, because it really comes in only on certain phrases. I wanted it to sound as small, but also have a little bit of reverb, hence the small chamber reverberator. And then I also added a cathedral reverberator on the main vocals to really enhance that space and really make that lead sound more majestic. So right here I got that cathedral going. And I really only have it going in the chorus just because during the verses I like to make it sound a little bit more dry so you can hear my words. And then in the chorus I want it to sound more full. And then I also added a basement reverb on the drum part as well, just on like one specific part. It really doesn't stand out that much, but it was during a transition, so I wanted it to sound a little bit smaller and a little bit more distant. So that's reverb for you. Next I'm going to move on to vocal effects, last but not least. So vocal effects are super important when producing a pop or rock song because you really want the piece to sound as full and as layered as possible. One thing I always mess with is harmonization. You notice in songs on the radio there are always layers to that person's voice, and I really like to take advantage of the transposition feature. Okay, so notice over here I have 3 different vocal tracks going on. This one in the middle is the untouched, completely normal raw version. Notice how I didn't even mess with the transposition. And then the top one up here is where I moved it up an entire octave. That's 12 semitones. So the higher one is going to sound like and then we got one on the bottom here that deals with 2 entire octaves lower. Notice how I moved it to 24 semitones down. And this is going to sound like. So if you put that all together, it sounds pretty cool. So I like to work with octaves instead of chords or like thirds or fifths, just because it sounds more open and a lot more layered. Dealing with smaller intervals just kind of makes it sound small, and I like it to sound open. So that's just my personal preference. So that's how you harmonize if you don't really feel like recording a separate vocal track on your own. You just mess with the transposition. Super easy. Another vocal feature I absolutely love is called a vocoder. You hear a lot of vocoder stuff in music by Daft Punk, Skrillex, even Black Eyed Peas stuff. And it's that feature that makes your voice sound robotic. So what you do is you drop a vocoder on your vocal track. So what I did is I found a vocoder right here. You just drag it like so. I already did that. So I dropped it on this vocal track though. So if you go and double click on it, see that my vocoder's right here. And then I drop a basic analog synth on an empty MIDI track right underneath it. So you see here I got this synth right here. After that, I write in a simple set of chords on the synth's MIDI region, especially one that corresponds to the song's key, obviously. So if you look in this MIDI region, I just got a chord going the entire chorus, basically, just to make sure you've got every single syllable called for. And then I merge the tracks. So I mute the synth track, and then I go over to the vocoder, and I make sure that the carrier is set to external, and then the audio is being sent from track 7, which is this synth track right here. So it sounds really cool, and this is the ending result. So there you go. That's how to master techniques through Ableton.